A copy of the Open Meetings Act posted in the meeting room on the west wall and is accessible to the public at any time during the course of this meeting. First item on the agenda is item 2. It's the consent agenda. All items under the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or citizen so requests. First item is item A, approve agenda as submitted. Item B, receive and place on file all notices pertaining to this meeting. Item C, receive and place on file all materials having any bearing on this meeting. Item D, approval of minutes of regular meeting on May 7th, 2018, as on file in the city clerk's office. Item E, approval of treasurer's report of claims in the amount of $431,203.14. Item F, approval of Boswell report of claims in the amount of $109,091.86. Item G, approval of Keno satellite ownership change for Risky's 11 Inc., doing business as Risky's 11 Sports Bar and Grill, located at 2317 North 6th Street, to JNM Ventures LLC, doing business as Risky's. Item H, approval of application for addition to liquor license of Raymond A. Arter, doing business as the Black Crow, 405 Court Street, for an additional outdoor dining area. Item I, approval of special designated license application of ASA Holdings LLC, doing business as Godfather's Pizza, for a fundraiser event to be held on June 23, 2018, from 6 p.m. to 12 a.m., at 556 Sargent Street, Beatrice, Nebraska. Item J, resolution number 6218, executing the application for program certification approval to renew Traffic Safety Plus's certification to administer stop classes for the city of Beatrice. Item K, resolution number 6219, executing the preliminary engineering services supplemental agreement number 4 between the city of Beatrice, Shamir Associates, Inc., and the Nebraska Department of Transportation for Beatrice Hannibal Park Trail Project number ENH-3442, control number 13212, setting out the modifications and/or additional duties and/or funding responsibilities for the federal aid project. Item L, resolution number 6220, regulating parking along 19th Street between Carlisle Street and Dorsey Street. Item M, resolution number 6221, executing the construction engineering services supplemental agreement number 2 between the city of Beatrice and Speece Lewis Engineers, Inc. for the 2nd Street, Court Street to Ella Street project, NDOR project number ENH-61056, control number 13127, setting out the additional inspection and testing necessary and increasing Speece Lewis's compensation for additional work. Item N, resolution number 6222, entering into an interlocal cooperation act agreement between the city of Beatrice and the city of Wymore, Nebraska, for the purpose of providing ambulance services to certain areas of Gage County located outside of the city limits of Beatrice on behalf of Wymore. And item O, resolution number 6223, appointing Jackie Bornemeyer to the Community Redevelopment Authority. Any item that a council member would like removed from the consent agenda? Anyone from the audience? Mr. Catlin?
Mayor, I would move that all the items listed under the consent agenda be approved, accepted, and or ratified as presented.
Second.
Moved by Catlin, seconded by Morgan, that all items under the consent agenda be approved. Your vote, please. And that is approved 7-0. Thank you, gentlemen. Next item is a public hearing on the new application of JNM Ventures LLC, doing business as Risky's 2317 North 6th Street, Beatrice, Nebraska, for a Class C liquor license.
You guys are not going crazy. We did do this 2 weeks ago. The reason we brought it back was because last meeting we did not have the follow-up motion, which says to approve or to recommend approval of the liquor license to the Nebraska Liquor Commission. So we brought back the public hearing again just to go through the process again. So you have the same reports that you had from Chief Lang last time and from Rob Merrow. Nothing else has changed. That's the reason why it's come back to you tonight.
Any questions? From the audience? All right, Mr. Catlin.
Mayor, I would move that the public hearing be closed at 7:05 PM.
Moved by Catlin, seconded by Billsbach, that the public hearing be closed at 7:05 PM. And your vote, please. And that is approved 7-1. 7-0, beg your pardon. Mr. Catlin.
Mayor, I would move that the new application of J&M Ventures LLC, doing business as Riskies, 2317 North 6th Street, Beatrice, Nebraska, for a Class C liquor license, be recommended to the Nebraska Liquor Control Commission for approval.
Second.
By Catlin, seconded by Morgan, that the application of J&M Ventures LLC, doing business as Riskies, be approved. Any further discussion? And your vote, please. And that is approved 7-0. Next item is a public hearing for the purpose of considering adoption of Plan Modification CC to the redevelopment plan for redevelopment area number 5, Homestead Junction redevelopment project.
This is the former Storecraft area. To give everybody probably a more familiar idea of where we're at, where we're located. Homestead Junction is looking to use TIF to redevelop that area. Their TIF application and the project itself calls for using TIF funds to help with the acquisition of the property, and then some other site development needs to be done. There'll be some more additional grading work that needs to be done. There'll be some utilities, those types of things that need to be installed. They are doing a traffic study to see, hey, once we fully build out the area, do we need a traffic light? If so, does Irving Street make sense? It's a little farther north. So they're doing those studies at this point. Those are the types of things that will be used, their TIF proceeds will be used for. I think if you see in the application has been brought forward, the exact development of the property is still unknown. It's still up in the air as to what's coming in and what's not. The proposal that you see before you includes a hotel, some retail office space, maybe some fast food restaurants, maybe a apartment building or two. But those are all still very much in limbo as things move forward and progress. We've had this through 2 of the CRA meetings so far. They've approved it both times. We did the cost-benefit analysis there. They felt it was the best interest of the city to move forward with this project. Planning and zoning looked at it, felt it was in agreement with the comprehensive plan. So we bring it before you. Assuming you guys approve of it, we'll go back to the CRA once we have a redevelopment agreement that is ready to be signed and approved.
Questions, gentlemen? Philip? Okay. From the public?
Stan, one thing, I guess.
Yes, sir.
On the redevelopment thing, we won't have a final map from them. I mean, we got an early kind of a hand-drawn map of what they were proposing. And I don't have I think this is perfect use for the TIF funds. My question is can they apply for it in a lump and then just change it as they need, or will they have to have very specific things that we'll have to approve?
We will do this project in phases, assuming each phase fits within the general redevelopment plan. There's nothing that this body will see again. Really, there's nothing the CRA would see again.
Okay.
If for some reason they decided to change and instead of having retail office space and apartment buildings, that type of stuff, if they decided to put in a smelting plant, that would be a significant change, and that would require another hearing back before CRA.
Okay, yeah, so basically my question is once we give them this, we've washed our hands of it, and as long as they're paying us back.
Essentially, yes. I mean, we'll have the agreement in place. It'll have its phases. It'll have deadlines in there they have to meet in order to go to the next phase. The agreements, generally the way we write them is if you fail on phase 2, you don't get to move to phase 3 unless you reapply.
Yeah, I've been through those many times. You've answered my question. Thanks. Yep.
Where,
Mr. Kerr?
where does that put us on our percentages of, because we dropped some over on west side, didn't we?
Right. You have to remember that percentage has to do with how much of the town you've deemed blight and substandard. We're still at 34.5% roughly, but individual projects do not count against that percentage.
Any other questions from the audience? Mr. Catlin?
Mayor, I would move that the public hearing be closed at 7:10 PM.
Second.
Moved by Catlin, seconded by Cook, that the public hearing be closed at 7:10 PM. Your vote, please. And that is approved 7-0. Next is resolution number 6224, adopting plan modification CC to the redevelopment plan for redevelopment area number 4, Homestead Junction redevelopment project.
Mayor, I would move that resolution number 6224 be passed and adopted.
Second. By Catlin, seconded by Claybaugh, that resolution number 6224 be passed and adopted. Any further discussion, gentlemen? In the audience? And your vote, please. That is approved 7-0. Resolution number 6224 been passed and adopted. Next, resolution number 6225, terminating the development agreement entered into on February 22nd, 2002, between the city, BCC Building 1 LLC, and SCC Educational Foundation relating to the development and improvement of the Beatrice Business Campus.
Mayor, I would move that resolution number 6225 be passed and adopted.
By Catlin, seconded by Billsbach, that resolution number 6225 be passed and adopted. Tobias?
If you guys recall, back in 2002, the city entered into an agreement with Gage County Economic Development Corporation, otherwise known as GCD, BBC 1, or BBC Building 1 LLC, which was Mike Ayers, and the Southeast Community College Foundation to build the business campus out by SEC Community College. In that agreement, there was supposed to be a building built over several phases. Ayers came through and built the first phase. That's what you see out there. Upon a completion of a certain percentage of occupancy, it was supposed to go on to phase 2 and then on to phase 3. If you saw in the media lately, the Southeast Community College has come in and purchased that building. I believe the foundation has agreed to donate that ground to the college as well. But in order for them to really get clean title to it, we kind of need to clean up this redevelopment agreement that's sitting out here. So we've had 3 of the 4 parties have come together and entered into this termination agreement that's before you, basically agreeing to terminate the outstanding redevelopment or the development agreement that's before you. The only party that's not signing the termination is GCD, because they have officially been terminated by the Nebraska Secretary of State's office, and so they don't have anybody or any entity that can sign on their behalf. And so that's why they're not party to this agreement.
Any questions, gentlemen? In the audience? And your vote, please. That is approved, 6 votes in favor, with Councilman Morgan abstaining. Resolution number 6225 has been passed and adopted. Next is resolution number 6226, entering into an agreement to loan $13,000 to Jeffrey B. Hubka and Shelley K. Hubka for their building located at 508 Court Street as part of the Downtown Facade Improvement Program and CDBG Grant 15-DTR-109.
Mayor, I would move that resolution number 6226 be passed and adopted.
Second.
By Catlin, seconded by Kerr, that resolution number 6226 be passed and adopted. Tobias?
This is the same agreement that we've passed with all the other individuals that have come forward. This is one of the last 2 agreements to be brought before you tonight. If you're concerned about Mr. Hupka being able to complete the work in time, most of the work he has to do with replacing windows in the upper floor. And so those are things that can be done relatively quickly. So I believe that we can still get those done by the timeline that we have set forth later this fall. But outside of that, it's the same agreement as everybody else has.
Questions? Comments? Anyone from the audience? And your vote, please. And that is approved 7-0. Resolution number 6226 has been passed and approved. Next item is an ordinance adding sections 17-35, 17-36, 17-37, and 17-38 to the Beatrice City Code regarding disorderly houses.
Mayor, I would move that said ordinance be given number 18-009. The title therefore be approved, the rules be suspended, and said ordinance be read by number only 3 times tonight.
Second.
By Catlin, seconded by Billsbach, that the ordinance be given number 18-009, the title thereof approved, rules suspended, and said ordinance be read by number only 3 times tonight. A motion to suspend the rules is not debatable. Your vote, please. That is approved. 6 in favor, with Morgan a no vote. Is that correct? Thanks, Robert. Ordinance number 18-009 by number the first time, ordinance number 18-009 by number the second time, and ordinance number 18-009 by number the third and final time.
Mayor, I have a move that ordinance number 18-009 be passed and approved.
Second.
Moved by Catlin, seconded by Billsbach, that ordinance number 18-009 be passed and approved. I'm going to call on the Chief of Police, Bruce Lang. Bruce, you want to give the council the explanation that you and I talked about?
Bruce Lang, Chief of Police. We brought this forward as a tool that we can use to help us in houses that or residences or apartments that we might have continuous problems by a lot of MIP parties or just parties in general, or a lot of disturbances there, and they just seem to manifest themselves and continue. This is a tool, Lincoln uses this, lots of cities have an ordinance that's very similar to this one. Probably more importantly, let me start by saying what it isn't. It doesn't make the landlord responsible for the crimes that someone would commit at their house. That's not what this is about. This does not do any of those things. This is a city ordinance. It doesn't deal with major criminal offenses. That's not what city ordinances are about. This is more of if for example, you have a neighbor and you constantly have to call the police because there's people urinating in the front yard, there's parties going on, there's those kind of things that are upsetting to the neighborhood. This is a tool that we can use, first off, to the people that live there, the people that are staying in that house. And then as time goes on, if that isn't, we're able to resolve that with the people that live there, or if those people leave and the same problems with the next tenants come in, then we can come back to the landlord, and this gives us some action where we can come back to the landlord and say, hey, we're having all these problems with these folks, you need to take some action to evict them or do whatever you need to do to correct their behavior. Most leases, as was pointed out to me, most leases have a clause in there that says you can't violate city code. Well, doing those kind of things would be a violation of city code in a lot of cases. So it's just a piece of the puzzle that we can help us try to keep neighborhoods calm, safe, and try to prevent reoccurring problems that do occur from time to time, and they kind of go in ways where you'll have an area where there is a lot of problems and then areas where there aren't. So,
Mr. Kerr?
Chief, you said that the homeowner, if this is a rental, that the homeowner will not be held responsible for the actions of those other people, right?
You can't be.
Okay, when you go to the first time and the person that's living in the house is cited,
Okay.
will you send a letter or some kind of notice to the property owner, the house owner, letting him know that this has been done, that there is a problem, that perhaps he should address it?
The answer is we wouldn't do it after the first time because we wouldn't write a citation for this. This is not designed for first-time offenses. This is a chronic violator thing. We're there to, some of these houses we go to a lot. And so this is for, you're confusing I think maybe the offense. But we're not going to, this is a tool to use for chronic violators. This is not a tool we're going to use. Every MIP party is not going to get a citation for disorderly house. That's not the intent of this ordinance. But if we did have someone, like you said, Rich, that where we did have that problem and we cited the residents for this kind of thing, yes, then we would send a notice to the landlord. Probably more than that, we'd probably call them
Well, when
Give
would
them a
your
phone
first offense, because in section 1738, A, B, and C sets out the fines and the jail time for this thing. When would your first offense be?
I don't want to put a number on it because,
That would be at your discretion.
correct.
Okay.
It'd be at the prosecutor's discretion. We would, in our world, even though we write a ticket that doesn't always get prosecuted, that's still the prosecutor's discretion. And this ordinance also, gives, by doing this, also allows her to use some other nuisance civil actions that might happen down the road if we had a real chronic place. This is for chronic violators. This is not for, we have an MIP party someplace like we had Saturday night. That's not a disorderly house. You have one where this is your third time there and people are climbing out the windows and the neighbors are saying, there's one of these parties every week and there's loud stereos and da-da-da. This is a tool that we can use to combat that.
But once the first, I'm just asking if the first offense, can the homeowner be notified that there is a problem though?
Yeah, the answer to that is yes.
Okay, and what's the difference between this and disturbing the peace?
Disturbing the peace is a separate individual ordinance. That's a really good question. Disturbing the peace means that your peace, an individual citizen's peace, is disturbed, okay? And so that means, let's say that you said Rick did something to disturb your peace, okay? Then you would have to testify against Rick in court that your peace was disturbed. I can't do it because the police officer's peace can't be disturbed. That's the law. So you would have to, this way, it allows us, law enforcement, the government, to do this without you having to go and testify in court.
Okay, thank you.
Rick?
I think the landlords were concerned that if this would happen, there was a disturbance and everything, that they start a process of eviction, that there was a possibility that they would be fined for some reason. I think there was a misconception there. Maybe in the memo, it said in that first page that we received in the digital format that the landlord could be fined also.
If they chose not to do anything about the residents, allowed these things
If
to
they
continue.
chose not to do anything about it. What they were concerned about, it takes 60 to 90 days to get a tenant out of there,
At
that there
least.
is no way that the landlord is going to be fined.
I think the best example is our junk motor vehicle ordinance that we have, even the old one and the new one. We find it's written that both the landlord and the tenant are responsible for that junk motor vehicle. We have the ability to fine one or both of them for having a junk vehicle on their property. Most of the time what we do is we send a notice to both parties. I cannot think of a single time that we have prosecuted the landlord for the tenant's junk vehicle on the property. There's another one where, again, you could do both, but our practice has been we don't do that. I would think it would be a very similar practice in this case.
I would think, I don't want to speak for Abby, but I would think that a landlord says, they're in the process of being evicted, because of these problems, that's the problem, we've solved the problem. The problem comes in when nothing happens.
Sure.
And nothing, because, quite honestly, if you have a house that's of minimal value and your clientele is paying you $600-700 a month, you may not be able to get anybody else in that. You might be reluctant to evict those people. And so that's kind of being hard here, but that's kind of the issue where you do it. But, if a landlord is in the process of evicting someone, I'll let Abby speak to that, but I can't imagine any,
That's what they're concerned about.
yeah,
right?
and that's just not gonna happen.
Bob?
I had some of the similar questions because I think Rick is optimistic with 60 or 90 days
Yes.
for eviction. It's not an easy thing to do and go through, and sometimes your problem renters are more savvy about the law than what we probably are, and so it could take at least that. So is this mainly targeted toward parties? Because I'm also thinking about sometimes, depending on the clientele, you may have 5 calls to the same apartment in 6 weeks, but they're going to be different calls.
Yeah, this is 100% directed towards nuisance type parties. We have residences, Mr. Morgan, where we are there every week on social issues that are not this kind of disturbance. That's not what this is about. Those folks aren't climbing out the windows when they see a police car drive by. They aren't urinating in the front yard. They aren't driving through the neighbor's yard. That's the kind of
Okay.
issue that this ordinance is designed for. Not for the normal police work.
Okay, that kind of helps clarify things, and that's one of the reasons I voted no, because I don't remember really discussing this at a work session and whatnot, so I thought it was important to get that clarification.
Ted?
Well, I was contacted by two different
45 years ago.
owners, both property owners, and one of them, and she made a good point. She said, I put it in my leases that if, there's a problem with police or that they can be evicted. And then she goes on to say that, she doesn't want to become the parents of her tenants. And I appreciate that. But the other thing that she said in here that I don't know how we address, but she said that oftentimes when this reaches that saturation point, and they, you've contacted them, they begin to evict, that they'll trash the residence, they'll trash that home. Maybe this ordinance doesn't cover it, but I mean, is that a thing that they contact you and say, we've had personal I mean, I look at it and say, okay, criminal mischief, but what is their, how do they dig out of that plight, I guess?
Well, I mean, we have charged folks with criminal mischief, which is a vandalism. Like plain talk, it's vandalism. We've charged people with that when they went in and kicked holes in walls and those kind of things because they were mad at their landlord because they got evicted. Unfortunately, I don't see, there's really no way to avoid that because if the problem presents itself that this ordinance would address, then they need to be evicted. And I don't know how you alleviate that concern, because I know that that's happened and we have charged people with it for sure.
Okay. Well, I guess just having that ability, I hadn't contacted them back yet. All my response was we have a problem, we have to do something about it. So sorry, but I'm voting for it and I know Lincoln's had this ordinance, and they did when they had the north bottoms. That's when they initiated this. It was the same thing with the upholstered furniture on the front porches. I mean, they swept this with a pretty broad brush, and I think that, and if you go to Lincoln and you look at these areas, they are cleaning those up. So, I guess my last question to you is really, what do you hope to accomplish with this? Because are you trying to alleviate the problem, or are you just trying to move the problem from one point to another point? I mean,
Well, I think I want to alleviate the problem because it doesn't do me any good to move it from one point to the other, as long as it stays in here. If it alleviated it to Lincoln, that might have a different answer, but that's not what we're talking about.
Right.
I think that this is the type of ordinance that has a deterrent effect.
okay,
I think that it tells people that, hey, if you have these parties, even though you might not rise quite to that level where you're going to get a ticket for it because the neighbor doesn't want to testify, which is a big problem because, little old lady, I'm old, so I can use that term now.
Right.
Little old lady doesn't want to go to court and testify against the 20-somethings that are causing this grief. This gives us just a tool to help solve that. I honestly don't see this being used a whole bunch.
okay,
I see this used sparingly and somewhat very carefully, and for those chronic problems that we can't solve.
this is a surgical approach, not a shotgun.
Yeah, that's the one I was looking for. This.
There you go.
Yeah.
Let's see, you're old and it's slipping away.
My
Okay.
things come and go. So that's kind of how I see this. Responsible landlords, quite honestly, have zero to be concerned about here.
Okay,
Zero.
okay.
Any other questions from the council? Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, sir.
Mr. Engelman is here with us. You want to come on up, Laverne? If you would give your name and address, please, and who you're representing for the record, that'd be great.
Laverne Engelman. I'm with the Gage County Rental Association, one of the board of directors. For those of you that don't know much about the Gage County Rental Association, it's landlords. Anybody in the Gage County can belong to it as long as they have property in Gage County. And at this point, we have 86 landlords that belong to our association. And I went through this afternoon and tallied up. We have roughly 600 rental units in Beatrice. So there are quite a few members. Now, I'm not saying that as far as the influence, but I'm speaking also on behalf of those landlords. We did not send anything out because we did not really want a lot of people here, but maybe to address some issues that are in this ordinance that we have concerns about. I think the ordinance as a whole, we need that. I don't want a nuisance next door to me either. I do not want my rental property to be a problem. I do have it in my lease that if the police are called and if they're issued a citation, I have a citation in there because any neighbor can call and report, and if it's a problem, there should be a citation. And if there's a citation in my lease, I can proceed with eviction. And one of you pointed out that does take 60 to 90 days. I've only had to do 2 evictions, and they've both been in the last year. But in the last 20 years, I have not had a phone call from the police department, so I assume all activities in my rental property have been fine. That's why I would like to be notified, and I'm sure other landlords, even on the first, because if there is a problem, I would like to address it as a landlord with my tenant from the beginning and not wait until it becomes a major problem 3 times down the road, and then I get a phone call and I don't know anything about it. That would be one of my concerns with this ordinance, to let the landlord be in the loop right away.
I think the chief addressed that, Laverne.
Well, I don't know. I don't think he
It's either
really
gonna be-
said that they would call the first time.
Well, I don't think he said he'd call the first time. I think if it was a little more habitual, that they would, yes.
Well, why let it go on if it's a problem?
That's the chief, he's right behind you.
Okay. You want to go ahead?
My name is Jeremy Engelman, and I'm actually the president of the Gage County Landlord Association. I actually had a little more to discuss, but much of it has been brought out and discussed already. I guess those whom I've talked to within our organization, the biggest concerns, which have kind of been previously mentioned, is the fact that many feel they are being tasked with babysitting, for a lack of a better way, their tenants. As landlords, when we sign the lease, yeah, we owe property tax and we still technically own the property, but we give up many of our rights as an owner to those tenants. And those tenants, more times than not, have more rights to that property than we do until an eviction process and due notice and processes have taken place. I understand what's been said, and I appreciate your reassurances, Chief, that you spoke about earlier, but bottom line, guys, I don't see it in here. I don't disagree with what you're trying to do. I am supportive of giving the chief the tools he needs to effectively enforce the laws and safety of the community. I don't think the council is totally off at considering this. But as this is presented tonight, I am opposed to this in every way, shape, and form. And I think it can be tweaked. I would love to see this council table this for a couple of weeks, put a committee together, a couple of your members, visit with us I'd be happy to put some of our board together. Let's do a lunch, let's talk about it, let's see if we can't get this right.
What don't you like about it, Jeremy?
It's, it's too broad, for one. I mean, you know, I understand with the assurances, but that's not what's in here. That's not how it's written. And that, you know, some of you may be, some of you may not be here 20 years from now.
God, I hope not.
This is probably, this is probably still going to be on the books. What if the next guy doesn't view it as you all intend it to be tonight? That is my concern. That is my concern, is it lends itself to being put in tonight with all the right thoughts and intentions, but being corrupted later because it's not specific enough. That's my concern.
And I guess same thing could be said about the next chief of police. I mean, 10, 20 years from now. What we heard tonight from the chief tonight, how he would or would not enforce this, and nothing against the chief. I mean, in all due respect, the next chief might look at this different and enforce things different. Maybe lay it out, spell it out a little bit plainer in English, not be so broad to leave it up to the discretion of either the chief or the city attorney to do as they see fit. Maybe beef up the fines. $350, maybe raise the second offense higher than the third. I mean, if I was a tenant, I would hate to have to shell out $700, $800 for the second offense. Maybe I would think twice about having a party. So,
Ted?
I understand that this is pretty broad, and I guess to answer your question, Jeremy, what do you do if 10 or 20 or 30 years down the road that you don't like how this is being enforced, and what do? You contact your city councilman, you contact the city administrator, you contact chief of police, you come back here and you ask it to be repaired. That's how that you know how that works. But I also know that, and I appreciate your concern about it being broad, but I go back to we've got to do something, and I understand that you guys have the feeling that the city is trying to put this all the responsibility back on you as property owners, as renters, as landlords, that we're trying to put and you want that taken away, and you want that responsibility put back on the city. That's what I'm taking from your...
No, actually, I'd like those that are the problem to be held more responsible. And
Well,
the city shouldn't have to babysit everyone.
No.
And myself as a landlord should not have to.
I agree.
People should enforce and police themselves to a point. Personal responsibility is a big thing, and accountability is very important. It's, I understand I can be back here in 20 years. You know, honestly, I don't even want to be here tonight. But I would like to see you guys get this right.
Yeah.
And would a couple of weeks make that big of a difference? To come back in a couple of weeks after gaining more input, maybe tweaking this a bit? I mean, is that going to cause any great community concern, safety issues? Or would that be a reasonable consideration for the council to consider?
I get that. I understand what you're asking. There's no reason that we can't enact this evening and continue to do that. If there's a problem in a month or 2 months or 6 months, we can tweak it. But I'm ready to vote on it tonight.
Rich?
First of all, I agree with you with the first citation. You should be, and is there any way we can write that into the ordinance? Do you need an amendment to this or anything, or can you just write that in?
We're not allowed to just change those after you vote on them. If you want to make those changes, you have to make the amendment tonight.
I'd like to make an amendment
You have to make a motion to amend it. If you want to, we'll get you, once you decide exactly what you want, let me know and we'll help you out there.
Okay, I'm gonna decide here in just a minute, but to address your problem, you know, these kids that rent these houses, and some of them that the chief is talking about, Lord knows what kind of debauchery they're gonna come up with. I mean, these kids today, you know, well, I mean, I shouldn't say kids, but these people today, you know, if we laser target in on something, we're not gonna be able to catch everything that they're doing, you know, crawling out a window, urinating in the yard. This is, I think, why we're trying to give the chief a little broader brush to do that, because first of all, my dad had rentals years ago. And when those kids got in there, they just tore the out of that house. And we're trying to protect that with you also. And, but that's up to these guys what they want to do.
Well, and I think the
As far as-
situation isn't rampant in the community.
Yes.
Not today.
Yes.
But we want to stop it as quickly as we possibly can. You know, I think we have to take into consideration the expense, the money that is spent by the police department and their forces going out to these places all the time. And we also have to take into consideration the other citizens that we have in the community that are calling these nuisances in to the police department and have to put up with this. So I don't have any issue with the ordinance as it is being presented. I don't know kicking the can down the road 2 weeks or 6 months from now is going to help matters. I like the fact that it's a little broad. I think that they can make their own decisions based upon discretion of the first-time offense versus several different offenses. I think that if we put some type of a notification through an amendment in the ordinance where the landlord is notified, I think that would certainly be agreeable with all. Phil?
I do like the idea that we are leaving it a little broad, just for the fact that the party behind my house, I might not find objectionable. The same party behind Bob's house, he might find very objectionable and want to call it in. So it gives the police a little more discretion for what the neighborhood might consider tolerable too, you know.
Rick?
Listening to everybody, I think everybody has the same intent. Everybody agrees there's something needs to be done. This is the first time we've heard this, so I don't have any trouble tabling it for 2 weeks or whatever and talk about it. But I think.
But what I'd like to know is what are we going to accomplish in those 2 weeks?
Well,
I need to have some suggestions in my mind.
I had made the suggestion earlier, appoint a committee. I'd love to sit down, gain some community
To
feedback,
do what, Jeremy?
to try to discuss ways to make this agreeable for everyone. I mean, I get it. Some like broad, some may think it's a little too broad. Try to find a little common ground, guys.
What's not,
Whatever you guys want to do.
I'm sorry, what?
what in here is not agreeable? What don't you like about it?
Well, I addressed that earlier when I was speaking. I don't like how it's worded. Honestly, guys, this if this thing passes the way it is, it really makes me seriously consider whether I'm investing in the right community. I appreciate where we're trying to go with this, and I don't dispute where we're trying to go. I just don't think this is quite right to get it there.
Give me the wording you don't like.
Any owner, leasee, resident, occupant, or person having actual use, possession, or control of any room, house, building, structure, or premises who causes, makes, or permits conditions of a disorderly house shall be found guilty of maintaining a disorderly house. Okay, as a landlord, I could be considered an owner. Possession or control, that's pretty broad. You give up much of that, but it's broadness of 17-36 as a whole, as it is written and presented in front of me this evening. That is the language I have a concern with.
And on the to permit conditions of an orderly house, as far as the landlord, I'm not going to let it go on or encourage it, but if I don't do something about it, my feeling or my interpretation of that is I'm permitting it to happen unless I evict them. So if I don't evict them, then I'm liable for a citation, the way I understand it, because you want me to evict or any landlord evict them, and where are they honestly going to go? We're just going to kick them out of our rental, and I'm not saying mine personally, to somebody else here in town. Most of them are going to move somewhere else.
I think that's part of the deterrent effect though too, is it'll make it really difficult to rent elsewhere if you've been evicted for violating this ordinance.
If you've been evicted, right? Because that's public knowledge.
Yeah.
But sometimes they move out, and the next landlord doesn't know it.
Right.
And unfortunately for them, that problem just moves around.
What do you guys want to do?
Yeah.
Rich?
On 1736, you cited any owner leasee. That is just a little misleading. And correct me if I'm wrong, Abby, but what this means is if the guy owns the house, he is liable to this. Owns the house and lives there, and not necessarily the landlord owns the house, but the guy who owns the house. You're just covering the guy who owns the house, or a leasee of a property, or residence or so. I think we're kind of mixing this up. He says he's the owner, which he is, but the leasee would be the one that would be fined, not the owner.
Correct.
Rental, correct?
Yeah. And if we,
Maybe that needs cleaned up a little bit to,
If I may interrupt, that's when I read that the first time and saw owner, I thought of myself as owner, leasee, even though I didn't live there. You was talking about me. But maybe this needs to be clarified as far as owner, as each one of you own your own house. If you have a party at your house, you own that house. So I can see, it's just kind of a,
and see, when I read it just the opposite,
Yeah.
because I don't have rentals.
right,
So,
right.
so I see where you're coming from
Yeah,
there.
when,
but-
when we read it as a landlord, we look at it, how's this gonna affect me? And,
And I can understand that.
Here again, I wanna go back and say that, we need ordinances like this, but we have to look as landlords. Are we going to get a citation down the road for, especially if we don't know anything about it? That's why I like the first offense, to know something about it. So,
Well, I'm going to make an amendment to this
Okay.
for that purpose there.
I think, and in the future, if there's anything we could do as landlords, please contact the association. Jeremy's president right now. We're not suggesting that we want to tell you how to put ordinances together. That's not our job. You have a city attorney. But hear our side, how it may affect us as a landlord. That's all we're asking.
My question there, you have that problem with the owner. If we took the owner out, okay, and put in a sentence maybe at the end that says, an owner that has been given written notice of maintaining a disorderly house may be fined as in the conditions. So if I have sent you a letter saying, hey, you are maintaining a disorderly house at so-and-so address, here's the violation they have. 2 weeks later, we come back and do the same thing. We can now fine you and the tenant.
If,
Defeats the purpose of the end.
If we may be able to.
yeah, go ahead.
You want this? If, you referenced 2 weeks, that would help address our concerns to a point. I would also suggest considering a little bit extra language concerning if, unless the eviction process has been started, something to that effect, because we can't legally always get them out of there in 2 weeks. So, I mean, that problem may be ongoing for 2 or 3 months, but
That's why
we're doing what we can with one hand tied behind our back.
If
So,
you go in and talk to Gabby and you say, I haven't started this, she probably is gonna say under May, okay.
Right, then I don't consider that you permitting the conditions to
Right,
continue.
we're-
You're doing everything you
then we should
can in your power to
Okay.
stop the problem.
What's that?
I mean, it's not aimed toward responsible landlords in any way, shape,
I-
or form. It's if, the landlord is aware of a problem, either doesn't care, or as Chief Lang explained, doesn't want to risk not being able to fill that property, so they just let it persist and persist and persist.
Once again, as personally myself, I'm not concerned about the ordinance the way it's written, because it's not going to affect me. But being on board of directors, I have to speak as the group. And I know we have some landlords out there that do not have the best properties, just like we have homeowners that don't have the best properties. But we have to do what we have to do. And back to address what you said, I like the idea. If it's 3 citations and the landlord won't do anything, give me a ticket, yes.
Bob?
But if I start the process of eviction, I'm doing something. But I think they should get a citation, not just a verbal warning, personally, and have to pay that first fine, that second fine, that third. Then I'll evict them. Well, I'll evict them before that if I know about the first one.
Okay.
So.
Bob?
I think everybody's kind of moving the same direction, but I've heard several things of trying to make modifications on the fly. In my opinion, I think the best thing that we can do, and I'd like to make the motion to postpone this for 2 weeks.
Is there a second?
second.
Actually, it'd be a motion, probably just postpone to a future council act.
Okay, for a future council meeting.
Moved by Morgan, seconded by Kerr, that we postpone this until a future meeting. All in favor, say aye. Beg your pardon. Sorry. Your vote, please. And that is approved 7-0. And I guess what I'd like,
We do want to move this along.
what I'd like maybe Laverne and Jeremy for you to do is sit down with Abby and Tobias to try to hammer out what this ordinance is going to look like, what it can look like. As long as it's agreeable, it's probably not going to be everything you want, and it's probably not everything we want, but hopefully we can come to some kind of a compromise.
Well, I think we all want the same goal. We
Good.
do. And I want to thank everybody on the council.
I appreciate you guys coming tonight.
thank you. I'll give you a call tomorrow. Abby, Les, thank you.
Can they get the first citation deal?
Oh, they'll work it out.
Should the chief be in on that too?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll grab Chief.
Yeah, the chief ought to be there too. Yeah, that'd be great. All right. Next item is the public forum. Purpose of the public forum is for the presentation of an item by the general public to the city council for consideration at a later date. No discussion or action will be taken by the city council at this time. Anything for the public forum? Anyone? Council, audience? All right, we're ready for the city administrator's monthly report.
Again, just to update you on a few things. If you haven't noticed, Hannibal Park's been busy. They've had 3 tournaments already, had another one this last weekend with about 30 teams out there. Probably the way you notice the most, if you're not involved out there on the softball fields themselves, is all the different ball uniforms rolling in and out of various locations throughout town. So that's been going well. The soccer fields over in Riverside irrigation's been put in. If the weather goes well, we'll get that thing seeded yet this week. And so you'll start seeing grass grow up there and then start to look more and more like a soccer field. Hopefully, we're hoping to have it be playable by fall. That's kind of the goal we have at this point.
Great.
Hannibal Park Trail is out for bid. That is a small portion of trail that's going to go through the Hannibal Park system. It's part of our land and water conservation grant that we received. That's also put in the parking lot that's been out there and the playground that's going in, a picnic shelter, some of those amenities. This is that portion of that grant that is currently out for bid. And then also the batting cage facility is out for bid at this point. Those are due back here, I think mid-June, we'll be bringing them back to this council. So last, if you don't drive on Dorsey Street, you will notice that we closed it today from 9th to 11th. We had signs up all week letting people know that it was coming. We have some more patchwork that needs to be done. Street crews are the ones doing the work in that area. It didn't stop some people from driving on yards and sidewalks to get around it. But we do want to let everybody know that it is closed. There is a detour. If you could please proceed 1 block to the south. It's a manageable detour. We'll get you around it. But other than that, any questions anybody has?
Make sure, but if they got any questions, call Tobias Templemeyer.
Okay, Tobias, thank you very much. Any questions of Tobias? We will not have a work session this Monday night, so our next city council meeting is going to be on June 4th, 2018, right here in these chambers. Mr. Catlin?
Mayor, I would move that the meeting be adjourned at 7:56 PM.
Second.
Moved by Catlin, seconded by Billsbach, that the meeting be adjourned at 7:56 PM. And that is approved 7-0. Thank you, gentlemen.